Well, good Saturday morning, everybody. It is April 10th, and today we are going to finish up the 9th chapter of Acts. We are going to look at verses 36 to 43 in the 9th chapter of Acts today. And this is a continuation, really, of the story we had yesterday. We had the healing of Aeneas yesterday, and there Jesus healed this man who had been paralyzed for 8 years, and now today he is going to be heading off to a nearby town called Joppa. All right, so we are in chapter 9 of Acts. We are looking at verses 36 to 43, and we're just going to jump right in today because it's Saturday. Now in Joppa there was a disciple whose name was Tabitha, which in Greek is Dorcas. She was devoted to good works and acts of charity. At that time she became ill and died. When they had washed her, they laid her in a room upstairs. Since Lydda was near Joppa, the disciples who heard that Peter was there sent 2 men to him with the request, "Please come to us without delay." So Peter got up and went with them, and when he arrived, they took him to the room upstairs. All the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was with them. Peter put all of them outside, and then he knelt down and prayed. He turned to the body and said, "Tabitha, get up." Then she opened her eyes, and seeing Peter, she sat up. He gave her his hand and helped her up. Then calling the saints and widows, he showed her to be alive. This became known throughout Joppa, and many believed in the Lord. Meanwhile, he stayed in Joppa for some time with a certain Simon, a tanner. Okay. One thing that you don't often hear mention about this, the very last there, he's staying with a tanner. I believe, if I'm not, I don't believe I'm incorrect in saying that tanners were considered unclean. Actually, they dealt with tanning hides, and it dealt with death and dead animals, and so they would have been considered unclean, and that would be an interesting thing for a disciple to be staying with someone that's believed to be unclean. But be that what it may, let's go back to the beginning. This woman's name is Tabitha in Aramaic, and it's Greek in Dorcas. I've mentioned before that Tabitha is a name you hear somewhat common. I shouldn't say it's common. Once in a while you hear it. But Dorcas, now in this day and age, you rarely ever hear it. That's not a very, it feels like a clumsy name. It feels like kind of a dorky name. I can remember that my first wife and I were looking for houses in Omaha, and we looked at a house on Dorcas Street. It was a nice house and all of that. And there was a small house because we were, but it was on Dorcas Street. I just didn't want to buy a house on Dorcas Street. I just couldn't deal with that name. So that we do have some discrimination sometimes there. But the word that translates in both Aramaic and in Greek to the word gazelle. So it's not a clumsy, awkward name. In fact, the name means strength and beauty. So this is a strong, beautiful woman, is what we're led to believe by her name, and a graceful woman, a gazelle. So she is a devout woman, and she is a very pious and giving and charitable woman. It says they're acts of charity. That literally translates to acts of mercy, okay, or mercy acts, to be technical. So she is a kind, giving, and loving woman, not just someone that is self-centered by any stretch of the imagination. She has become ill and she has died, and they have laid her in the upper room in her home. The fact that she has an upper room, it sounds like she must have been reasonably successful. And they have called Peter. They don't tell him. It doesn't appear that she's passed away. They're just coming to get him. He might be of the opinion, at least initially, that she's just ill. That doesn't say anywhere that it just says, "Come get him without delay." So Peter got up and went with them. When he gets there, he goes upstairs. All the widows and all of the women are gathered in the room, and it says all the widows, rather not women, all the widows stood beside him, weeping and showing tunics and other clothing that Dorcas had made while she was with them. Now, Widows, of course, charity, act of charity, giving. We're supposed to care for widows and orphans. And so the fact is, we're led to believe that she has been caring for these widows by creating clothing for them and giving them the blessing of being able to have clothing to keep them warm and protected and to cover their modesty as well. So this is part of that charity, that mercy that she has been showing to others. So it's that drives home that point. Peter asks them to leave or puts them out, it actually says, which could be, we could look at that as being reasonably forceful. And he gets down and he prays. This scene is very reminiscent of Jesus with the little girl. Little girl get up. But of course, there Jesus, as I don't believe, I didn't go back and reread it, but Jesus doesn't pray there. He just gets in there. It's just kind of like when he heals the little boy that's throwing himself in the fire. This kind only come out with prayer, but Jesus didn't pray. But Jesus doesn't need to pray necessarily to do those things, though he does pray in the garden. Got that. But Peter kneels down and he prays before he does anything. He goes before God and invokes God. He appeals to God for this blessing that's about to come. And then he tells her to get up, and she does. And he brings her out and presents her to everyone as being alive. And this miracle, this act of mercy, this act of power by God brings many folks to the fold. And it brings people to God. So, and then of course it just goes on and says that Peter stays there for a certain time with a spray, sometime with a certain sign. Here we have almost a reenactment of the resurrection. It's a showing that that God has the power over life and death. That through God there is life even after death. We want to look at it as that metaphor. We could look at Lazarus, the resurrection of Lazarus too. It's kind of reminiscent of that. The little girl brought back to life, or the son brought back to life for the widow. It is God's ability over that he has conquered death, that death has no hold over God. And coming out of the Easter season that we just have done, we've just been talking about resurrection and that life has conquered death. God has conquered death. There is more to come. There's greater things to come. And so we think that Tabitha here has probably been raised to continue her good works, but we know that eventually she will perish again, just as Lazarus died again, just as all of those died again, except for Christ, of course. He has risen and risen indeed. And so it is that metaphor that God has that power, and that there are greater things to come. God has truly and honestly and completely entirely conquered death, and that we too will live forever in eternity with him if we just believe, if we just look at these things and we too come to God, as so many did. So many believed in the Lord after this witnessing of Tabitha's being brought back to life. I want to say resurrection. It's not really a resurrection. That's being brought back to earthly life. So that's where I'm going to leave you today, and we will start chapter 10 on Monday. Don't forget, tomorrow is church, so we won't be doing a 9 o'clock live stream, but at 10 we'll be live streaming the service in the chapel. So with that, I'm going to let you go. Have a very blessed day, and please, please, please be a blessing to someone today. We'll see you all later. Bye-bye.